Hi, my name is Craig Slagle and this is XSI for my users. It's transition from other 3D packages using XSI along either in production or as an alternative tool. Here we're going to do is start just by going over the basics of XSI today, and we'll get you by the end of the day a full understanding of how to use the software, navigation, architecture and basic modeling. I'm going to start by setting up a project. Since it's the first time I've run this version, something to ask you when you come up what kind of interaction mode you've used. I've already started and I'm using the standard XSI interaction mode. You can change that in the file to XSI or QWERTY that's similar to Meyer's technique. There's also some other options if you go in to the keyboard mapping that allows you to set max versus or max hotkeys or Meyer or what they call QWERTY as well. So I'm going to start by setting up a project. Since we have at the moment the XSI sample project, we don't want to use that, so we're going to go File, New Project, and this allows us to make a new project. I can place it where I want. I like to put projects in my documents. Just something I had when I was working in production was everything I stored either in my documents or on the server, and it's the place I'd back up. Having things within the C drive in the install folder is always a bad idea. So let me just go into this case my documents, just hit select. Now it says my documents here, and I'll give this a project name, XSI Training Project. Alright, so training, which is XSI Training. Give it an underscore there so it's easier to read, and we'll hit OK, and that will create a new project. This is now my project is XSI Training. There's other projects I may want to use, so we can either link them using the project manager. Project manager allows us to link up projects, so we can say add a project and say where's my project. Well, I have in here the XSI Training 602. That's Adam Sale put these together, the training DVDs, and there's a whole bunch of examples and sample and files there you can use. Also, I just add another one. There's Training Project 2, XSI Training. These are other ones I've set up in the past. So you can see there's a few ones in here. I just want to add one more here. Okay. So we've got a bunch of projects linked up. If we don't want some of these, we can always delete them. We can copy files from one project to another if you want to as well. So let me actually delete this project here. If you delete project, that will delete all the files in the project. Be careful, don't push this button unless you want to delete everything in that project. Removing this, maybe it's an old project you have backed up, then you'll use delete project. Otherwise you can just remove from the list. Now just unlink the project. So just go here in this project here, a new scene. We have a new scene, so I'm just going to hit close in that case. And we're going to start by going through some of the basic interface and architecture workflow in the software. So the first thing is XSI is built up this way. You have at the top a menu. This menu gives you access to almost every single command in XSI. You've also got your different model, animate, render, simulation here. Those relate to these menus here. So people like to use these ones as your base tools. It's easier to see, but you can get to say primitive polygon mesh cube here, or model primitive polygon mesh cube over here. So this is a bit of a redundancy, but it's good to have them both, because often you're working in modeling and using like polygon mesh tools, and then you want to go in and just bring in a texture so you can go render and get your materials or other items you may need to access. So that's quite useful, having that redundancy within the interface. You know you can always find things at the top if you need to. We're going to start by building up a little bit of a scene. So what I'm going to do is I like to use reference, and I'm not going to talk about the interface in one big long stream because you're going to get very bored very quickly, and that's not the best way to learn. The best way to learn is to have fun. So we're just going to go minimize this for a second, and I went to Vancouver recently and took some pictures, and there's all these great little alleys, and here's a couple of pictures of this little alley. We're going to go ahead and start working them, kind of mocking up this alley here. How are we going to do that? Well, we're going to use some basic primitives. We're going to build first of all called the block world. You can use this in previs or in game design if you work on games, or in film just to quickly block out the environment before you start adding detail and spending lots of money. So we'll go in here and we'll start by using that. I kind of like to have that picture open, but trouble is if you have it open in like a viewer, every time you click on XSI it disappears. Well, XSI has its own viewer called the view, and it's under rendering, texturing, image clip viewer. You can either get it there, or you can just use the browser and open up an image from the browser. We'll just go image clip viewer, and we'll go file, import, and we'll go and find that import. This is your little browser window. Just go up, 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 until you get to your document settings, my documents. Oh, so is that one more because it's actually in my document settings demo desktop, and here we are. Now I've got these out of these. They're quite big images. I really should resize them a bit because they are kind of crazy size. I'm in icon view right now. There's list or icon view. If you actually click on it, it won't display it because it's too big as an image. If you double click on it, it will just open up in that viewer, and you can see it's really big. If you want to pan that, it actually doesn't have a pan on it as far as I know. Let me just quickly see. Yeah, this doesn't have a pan, so you actually have to right mouse button and go maybe to quarter size until you get it to the right size, or in this case you can even go down to 8th size and just have a very small little window of that in the image. There we go, and then we can see our image floating around here. We could have resized this, and it's kind of stupid having such a large image. This was a high resolution photo from my digital camera, but there we are. We've got the image now in the screen, and we can have it there, and even when you click on other screens it doesn't disappear behind. There's always a problem. It's not floating a window, so it's not currently logged onto a window either, because I'm not really matching this. I'm just using it as reference. I just want it there, so when I start throwing my primitives in, so let's start with a cube, primitive polygon mesh cube. When you create a primitive, first thing that happens is this window called the property editor opens up. You can name objects. We call this one building 1. You can change its size by changing its length just with these little sliders. You can adjust the sliders several ways. You can type numbers in, 10. You can click on there and use your square brackets or braces to go up and down in size. You can hold shift and go up in smaller increments, or control to go up in larger increments. The shift and control also works when you're working on a slider. If you hold shift and drag on the slider, it will slide a lot slower. If you hold control, in this case it won't make a big difference, but in some areas it will slide a lot faster. You can also change the subdivisions. We're going to leave them at 1 to 1 moment. We'll make this a little bit smaller, maybe actually we'll leave it at 10 for the moment. So there we are, we've got this. We can move this in position with our different tools to move. So again, I'm not going through the entire interface here. We're going to, as you can see here is your modeling window where you were able to create our primitive. We can now go over to here, move objects with our transformation tools. So go transform, there's scale, rotate and translate. If we're in translate, we should see a translation tool in there. I just had to click on that for a second. Okay, so what we're going to do here is going to get a series of cubes in the scene to block out our world. So we're going to start with this cube here we just created, and we're going to just move the camera a bit. The hotkey for that is S. So I'll hold S down. If I left mouse it pans, middle mouse it zooms, and right mouse it orbits. I actually prefer, I don't like that setup because I find most of the time I'm actually orbiting and zooming, especially zooming, and zooming being the middle mouse button, in my case the wheel, it's a little bit inconvenient. So what I'm going to do is change the mode under the file preferences, and here there's all different preferences. You can look at these when you have time, and you'll see lots of different options to make XSI act in different ways. But under Tools, Camera, I'm going to set the camera mouse mapping to alternate, and therefore we can now use our left mouse button as orbit, our right mouse button is pan, and our right mouse button zoom, and the middle mouse is pan. So left orbit, middle pan, right zoom. There's also the option to use Alt for navigation key, and it makes it more Maya-like, but I actually prefer not to turn it on because Alt key has so many uses within XSI. It's best not to use it. You can use it, but then you have to use Control Alt whenever you push Alt down. So it's extra key, extra finger, more work. Okay, so we have a one cube. We also want to move the cube, so we have here the transformation tools. We have Translate, T, Rotate, R, and Scale. And the hotkeys for these is V to translate, C to rotate, you can see a little C here, and X to scale. And the ways I remember those is X is like two arrows kind of going out, it's like scale. C is like a big round area, and it's kind of like rotate, and V is to me like an arrow, so translate. I'm going to move this one over to the side, just translate it and move it up a bit. I'm going to hit A, and you can also do Shift A to, in all windows, move the object. Okay, we just move this up a bit more, and we'll move it in the front view across a little bit. There we go. So now we have that position slightly better. We just move the camera a bit, hold S, left mouse in this case, and we'll just zoom out a bit to get a kind of angle roughly to match where we were. This will be probably maybe the middle building. We can move it, of course, back or forward to position it in a better position for different buildings. There we are. Okay, so we have that position. We're going to make another cube. We can duplicate this one if we want, or make a new one. We'll just make a new one, primitive, polygon mesh, cube. Call this one building 2. We'll leave it the same size and no subdivisions. We're going to move it, and we actually want to snap it to the corner here. There's several ways to move things and snap. I'll use snapping a lot. So one really cool feature is the temporary pivot. If I just try to snap this, I'd have to snap based on the pivot. If I hold Alt down and just click on the corner, it'll snap that pivot to that position. Now I can use snapping tools to snap this to the right position. So I'm just going to go to snapping. You can turn on or press Control or hold Control. I want point snap. Now when I drag, you can see it's going to snap to that point. Turn the snapping off, and we'll just go to scale. I'm just going to scale this one. Actually, it's about the right height, but just scale it down a bit, and there we are. So our second, and we'll probably, it's okay. We can move it back if we want to, or we can leave it with just a small amount of area. We're going to go to our third building. It's very similar to this building, so I'm just going to duplicate that. The hotkey is Control D. That will duplicate the object. We'll move it, V. Again, we'll probably use the snapping. We can just drag it here. We just look here, we can drag it down. If we want to use the snapping, we can just turn snapping on. It's already set to point snap. And you can actually see these right mouse button what snapping options you have. And we'll just hold. Again, we use the temporary pivot, so we'll just go Alt and drag. So Alt and click to drag on that pivot, and then again we'll just drag it till it snaps. It snaps in the wrong place in that case. We're just going to drag it here, get it snapped in this window. We'll just move the camera a bit and just have a look around here, the scene. So we can see what we have here. We want to scale this one up a little bit higher because this building's a bit higher, and it's probably maybe a little longer as well. When we get to see some of the other pictures, we can get a better idea of the length. But anyway, it's good. So we'll just go here, and we're just going to scale it up, and we're going to make this one a little bit longer. Okay, so we have our 3 buildings in the scene. Of course there's a large building next, so we're just going to make another. Again, we can duplicate this, there's no problem duplicating them. Control D. It remembers the previous offset, and we'll try to position it. Because we scaled a bit more, it doesn't quite fit, so again we'll move it. We use the temporary pivot, Alt, and just click or drag where it's to the corner. And the temporary pivot, if you actually click within the area, it will move freely, and if you actually just go to a corner, it will snap it. So if you're within the manipulator, it will drag freely. If you're away from it, it will snap. There's also several options with right mouse button to change its options and different things. Actually, when you're holding Alt down, you'll see that. So if you're holding Alt, you'll see a little menu here, and you can actually go here and click on it and actually get different options on that, like lock and reset. Anyway, that's fine. So just undo that, Control Z, and we'll just scale this up a bit, because this is going to be a large building, so just scale it from here and just scale, and then way up into the sky. This building here was actually several stories high. Again, see, it scales right now from the middle. The quick Alt and clicking means we can now scale it from there. Very quick and a great little tool. It's about 3 times the height of these 2 small buildings. So I'm just going to get my camera set up again, more into the camera picture angle, so I can kind of come back and forth. So I'm going to go a little bit further out in this case, and then we're going to memo cam. There's these buttons here that allow us to save a camera, so if you middle mouse, it saves it. So if I actually move the camera and click on here again, left mouse, it gets back to it. You can save as many if you want of these. We'll do one over here, and we'll do another memo cam middle mouse, and then we'll do one more. And it saves everything, including camera angle. If I actually change the camera angle and camera settings, it would know that as well. If I went to the camera settings, properties, and changed some camera properties, I'll do that there, but if you change a lot of these properties here, like the camera ratio and things, and you save one of these, it actually remembers all those settings, including everything. So you can see here a lot of those settings change. We don't want this one, so we'll just right mouse button that will remove it. Okay, so we've got a few buildings in our scene. We're going to add some more objects and just work with this. Going to get a primitive polygon mesh grid. In this case we'll scale it. So I'm going to talk about these tools in a bit more detail. Scale tool, you can drag here in the center to scale uniformly. You can scale, of course, in one axis or between 2 axes, and you can see this especially on a 3D object. When you're on the scale tool, X is a hotkey. You can drag between 2 axes and scale on 2 axes if you want. Just going to, you can double click on any window to roll it up. It's quite nice, or you can click on the little minimize to roll it down. It's kind of Mac-ish. So I'll just roll this one up for a second. You can see again, if I click at the top, scaling all 3, but if I actually go between 2, you can scale just in the 2 axes. Even though we don't need to rotate things, we will talk about rotate tool quickly. Again, you can click on any of the angles to rotate. If you click between them, it doesn't actually rotate unless you're in a different mode. So there's actually different modes you can have for here. So you've got local, global, additive, and local allows you to do a free rotate as well, as would global. Additive is a like gimbal inside Maya, so it's restricting you to one angle at a time. And translate, same idea. You can click on any of the arrows, turn the snapping off for a second. Click on any of the arrows to translate along a different axis. Okay, so we have our 3 buildings in there. We want to add some more objects in here. You can also translate, rotate and scale. You can double click on the axis to lock it, and that will lock the axis. Now you can't drag on any but that one axis. You can double click on the axis again to unlock the other 2, or double click on another one to switch to a different axis lock. So we'll get a few more cubes here from primitive polygon mesh cube. We'll make this one smaller, maybe about 2. Should be naming this. This is going to be one of the dumpsters. Okay, and we'll just move this into position again. So we can look at shaded mode. It's quite hard to see now what's going on with all the different objects. So we're just going to switch to shaded mode. There's also a hidden line, which is quite nice for a lot of modeling because you've got the wireframe and the shaded. Again, Alt, quickly get our pivot snapped. Just going to move off a bit because it's not snapping. There we go. Snap. And we'll just snap that to the grid this time. Again, we could just hold control down and you can see it's snapping the grid, the polygon grid, or we can just turn the points off and just actually snap it along the actual grid in the scene. So we're going to position this one somewhere towards the front of the first building. This is a smaller dumpster. You may need to scale it a bit more. We're going to get down a touch more. Let's get out a bit to get some of the proportions right. We'll look at this in several windows at once. It's about right proportions, and we'll just rotate this a bit. So we'll just go to rotate tool and just rotate that a bit. Just going to look in the top window, so I'll just roll this up so we can see exactly where it is. Zoom out a bit and we'll just move this in. That's great. Let's move it in a bit further here, so it's kind of close to the building. Okay, we want a few more of these. So we just duplicate it, Control D. Want this one straight, so I'll just turn the scale. We can type in numbers so we can just zero that out, and we'll zoom out a bit to position the next couple of dumpsters. I kind of like this top window here, but I like my picture, so I'm just going to move the picture down here and unroll it, and then we can see that one. We'll just move this back a bit. Just going to A and see everything in the scene. Again, we can switch to hidden line or shaded. Again, hidden line is quite nice in this case, and we're just going to scale this one up as well. So X, pivots again, reset to the middle, so we're just going to go Alt, put it in one of the corners, and then we can scale it from the corner. It just makes our life a whole lot easier. It's a bit taller. We probably need to make this one a bit smaller. We can get things repositioned and proportioned later on. You can kind of see how. So actually, I really want to get both these scaled. So I'll just pick them both. And if I go to the scale now, they'll scale them together, but they come off the ground. So again, with the Alt key, you can set the pivot to a corner of, and actually scale them both relatively. And they're almost kind of grouped, but not grouped. So just looking at that, good there. Okay, so take this one here, Control D, and duplicate it just for that blue one there. Just rotate it a bit, and we'll move it a bit. So we can see very quickly how we're blocking out our scene. The other side is this really large kind of white building. It takes up pretty much the whole other side, so it's very easy for me to just take one of these buildings here, duplicate it, and move it to the other side to kind of get that alley look, and we're just going to move it pretty much to here and just scale it. I'm not worried about moving the pivot this time because I am just scaling it to take up most of the area here. Just going to move the camera a bit just to get slightly better view, and we're just going to undo this memo cam, right mouse button, redo the memo cam again, and that's our kind of working view now for our scene. There's a lot more in here, of course. There's archways and doors and windows, and really you can go in and start adding a tremendous amount. You've got this big pillar right there halfway through the first building, so again we can use a primitive polygon mesh. Cylinder, we can move it into position. It's pretty much 1/3 or 1/3 across this building. This building's a bit bigger when you see the other pictures of it. Cylinder's a little bit, the radius a bit much there, so I'll just set that a lot smaller, probably about 0.2, maybe a bit bigger, 0.3. We could use hold shift and just go up and down by increments until it looks about right. And then we'll just go here and we'll scale that. Again we'll use, this goes pretty much, it's one of these structures that goes across the power line, so it goes pretty high up the building, probably about to here. So again, best thing for me to do here is move the pivot to the bottom, snap the object to the grid. So just hold control down for a moment, turn snapping on. Just going to move it now. Just snapping the grid was just to get it positioned on the ground, and then we just scale it until it's a good height. We're going to use this pillar throughout the scene to get some of these structures, and you can see it's pretty high up. It may even go to almost the top of this building. I'd have to check the original image. So you can keep going, keep blocking out. This is a great way of quickly building an environment, getting used to the interface, getting used to the software without spending a lot of time going through every single menu. We're going to go to the Explorer next and start organizing the scene, but this is good for time being. So one of the problems we have right here, we have this image of our reference image, and we noticed it was actually really high res. If you look at normal zoom, you can see right in there, very high res, and that's kind of wasting a lot of memory. So what I've actually done is I've gone in and I've recreated one in Photoshop, and you can see I've made one at 1024 by 768. And all I did was File, Import, and hit OK. I've already imported it once. I'm just going to hit Cancel. And then under the clips you can see the alley view reference. It's a much smaller one. It's still too big, so if I go half size, it's a pretty decent size, but still now maybe a little too small. So if I went to normal zoom, now it's a bit too big. If I really want to adjust this dynamically, I can go in here to Clip Properties, and I can go to the Transform tab, Enable Effects, and actually type in a custom size. So right now you can see different sizes you can put in, and you can get the size you want. So we can say, oh, it's too big right now, and we'll make this bigger or smaller depending on when it's going to fit inside the window. So maybe it'll be, 640 by 480, and you can see there, you can try and look at the inside. So you can see here, if we go to normal size versus normal size, we can go half size, It's actually the same as 64/480. Quarter size, or we can actually go in here, custom size, and type in a size till we have it fit the right size. And you can just use these to adjust the size until you get the size you want. So anyway, I normally would just go in, get the width correct first of all. Just going to get this window sized in. And then we'll just get the width where we want it to be. And we'll just adjust the height till the proportions are correct. So what I just did there was actually put an equation in because I didn't know exactly the size it was meant to be. So I just typed 420 divided by 4 times 3 because it's a 3.4 aspect ratio, and that gives me 315. And you can put math equations to any of these numbers if you want to, and it really can help you get the right size of things. So you can see that's still a bit too small, so maybe we can go a bit higher, 450, even 500, and then again we can do 500 divided by 4 times star 3, and there we are, we got that, the size correct. Just close that down, and we have that nice image there scaled up the way we would like it to be. Right now I put wireframe. We've got of course hidden line, shaded, and lots of other display options here you can adjust. If you go here, you can do, show wireframe on selected objects, show wireframe on unselected objects. But what's quite nice is being able to switch a lot of these modes dynamically, especially between shaded, textured, and wireframe. There's no hotkey for this, but you can go to, say, wireframe, and then middle click here, and it'll go to the previous one. So say you were in hidden line, middle click, you go between those two. But I really want to have a hotkey to define this, so what I'm going to do is File, Keyboard Mapping, and I'm going to create my own key map. I already have one here, Create Key Map. If I don't want that, just remove that one, yes, and I'm making a new one. I go back to XSI Key Map, new, and now copy the XSI Key Map to this new Craig map, and now I want to set a hotkey to change my wireframe and shaded. There's lots of different menus here showing you the different hotkeys. If I go down to the bottom one, that really has most of the standard kind of menu commands, and these are within each editor or special area. Trouble is, we don't know what that hotkey is. Well, I do, but say you don't know. So I need to find that hotkey for its wireframe. You can actually hit View in Browser and open it up in Explorer browser, in the Explorer window, and it'll show you all the tools and all the hotkeys, what's defined and what's not defined. And you could search this if you want, but it's much easier to use the Find. Control F is a hotkey for that if you don't know where Find is, and we can just type wireframe, and you'll see here is actually set wireframe display mode. You'll also see around the same area set textured, set textured. These, lots of these different ones are here. You see set hidden line. So we're really looking for set whatever mode. So we can close this window down, and we can start finding those. So click on XSI, and we'll go here and just type set wire, set space W, and you'll see set wireframe display mode. Now you need to assign to a hotkey, and you can see right now 5, 6, 7, 8 are available, right now, but they're not really because they're still assigned. So you see browser, render tree. Only the hotkeys aren't assigned the ones in white. If we look at control, they're still assigned. Shift, some of them are assigned, and you can normally see if they're assigned or not. You see this one is assigned, rest of them not. And Alt, these are assigned right now, as you can see. So what we can do is Shift is not actually assigned to 4, 5 and 6. So 4 we're going to do wireframe. So what we do is this time we just hold down the Shift key, click on wireframe and just drag that onto 4. Then we go shaded, we'll hold Shift down and drag that onto 5. And then we go to textured, and we'll drag that onto Shift 6. So we now have Shift 5 is wireframe, Shift 6 is shaded, and Shift 5 is shaded, Shift 6 is textured. We also have texture decal. I'm actually going to do Control Shift. Actually, Control Shift is a little bit hard to get to, so I want to make sure they're keys you can easily get to, because you don't really have a key combination that requires more than one hand. I always want to check it's one hand. So Control Shift and a number would be hard. So we'll just see if there's another hotkey there we can use. We'll look at Shift. 7's being used right now for texture layer editor. We may not need that, but it's still it's nice to. So I do 8 right now. So we do Shift and 8 for decal. Shift 8 for decal, and then maybe Shift and 3 for hidden line. Set hidden line, Shift and 3. Okay, so now we have all those, we can try them out. Shift 3, Shift 4, Shift 5, Shift 6, and Shift 8. Go back to Shift 3 to hidden line. It's just nice to have those hotkeys, and you can see it. It's whichever window you're over. So that's nice to have. So we have those hotkeys set now. We're just going to now organize the scene a bit more. We're going to go to a window called, let's roll this window up. We're going to go to a window called the Explorer. And if we go here under View, General, we have the Explorer. The hotkey is 8. So if we go there, Explorer, we can see all our objects. When we duplicate them, we added incremental numbers to them. Incremental numbers are good, but sometimes it's good to change those to letters or actual words to avoid you getting confused when things are automatically incremented. So if you want to do that, you can. Building A, building B, and you can do it if you want to. C, D, D. Or again, you could have used, letters instead. But it's up to you how you want to name or number things. Dumpster A, dumpster B, and this is a small dumpster, so I'll just go with this small dumpster. And grid, that should be named ground. So you can name things by clicking them and opening up when you click on the icon, open up a property window, or you can click on them and hit F2 and you'll be able to name them inside the window. You can also click a couple of times to name them. So click once, let go, click again. If you double click, it'll just open up a property. So we want to click once and then a second time to name stuff. So we have now all our objects named, which is always good to have, but they're not really organized as much. We have all these buildings. Oh, this should be named as pipe. It'd be nice to kind of organize these a bit more. So what I'm just going to do is make some layers to organize things so it's easy to turn things on and off. So the layers are a separate tab. You can see here we've got different areas of a window. Over the side here we have our layers, and right now if you've got animation layers or scene layers, we actually want scene layers. What I'm going to do is pick all the buildings, and I'm going to go layer, new layer from selection, and we'll call this building layer, and we now have a building layer. Then we're going to take all the objects, the pipe, the dumpsters, layer, new layer from selection, objects, layer, and then last of all we put the ground, layer, new layer from selection, ground, layer. And then we have these layers that enables us to quickly turn things on and off. So we can turn the building visibilities off, the ground off, and the objects off. We can also go and turn whether it can be rendered or selected. So we can turn the ground selectability off, and then you won't be able to select the ground. Or you will still be able to snap to the ground, you just won't be able to select it. So that's quite useful. Again, this would be similar in Maya to reference mode, or template, reference, not templated. So there's also ghosting. This is more for animation, but you can also ghost for animation. You can see these here. The window is a little bit small. You can open this in a larger window if you want to, or make this window larger by dragging this to see stuff, or you can go in each of these and kind of drag them around to make the tabs bigger or smaller. You can also have this as a floating window, and there is a view, general, scene layer manager, and you can see this window as a bigger floating layer window where you can actually go in and adjust a lot of these to get the sizes you want. It's a bit strange that the scale is not correct when it first opens it, so you can actually read things. Seems a bit strange, but sometimes things aren't quite organized the way you'd want them to be. So a little bit of tweaking here. I think in the window it's worth having this set up so you can actually see things. I should have scaled them out from the beginning. You can see there are color, render, select, ghost, and we can make that a bit smaller. There we go. So then our window doesn't need to be quite as big. Of course you can drag these back here so it's much smaller and still have the window set up in the way you want it to be. Of course, if you close that window and reopen it, and the hotkey I believe is it says it here, but it's just 6, and there you are. It did go back to its original size, but it was a bit of a pain, maybe a little bit of bug. Okay, so we have this window here. We have everything put in layers, and that just makes our life a little bit easier to manage our scene. There's also grouping. You can create groups. There's groups, and there's also transform groups. A group doesn't have any hierarchy information. It's just more like a selection set. So you could take the buildings and you could do edit group and just put them in the building group. Again, that doesn't have anything apart from it's a set of the buildings. You can see in here are the buildings. There's no hierarchy attached to it. If you actually want a hierarchy, you need to make a special group called the transform group. And it's create transform group in the edit menu, or down here in the edit tab, create transform group. And that's very similar to your Mars style group when you put everything under a new node. In this case, it'd be a null. And it's actually, I believe, a hidden null as well. Yeah, so. Okay, so that's basic transform group, and you can see it's another way of organizing your scene a little bit. You can also see it's showing you a lot of detail inside the Explorer. This detail always allows you to go in and kind of drill down into objects. So let me just undo that group. And if you look up building A, you can see here the poly mesh. You can click on the icon here and see the poly mesh is that poly mesh node where you have all your subdivisions and all the stuff built into it. You can also see the geometry in cube. Any animation would be under here. You've got the visibility tab, it shows whether an object is visible or not, renderable or selectable. You have lighting, display and geometry approximation. These are right now in italic, meaning they're shared properties throughout the scene at this time. When if I clicked on these, it may ask you, do you want to make a local property, and you can say yes or no. We'll talk about those other ones a bit later on. So we got layers, we looked at some basic groups here. What we're going to do now is going to start adding a bit more detail to make this a little bit more interesting. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's open up the picture again, and we can see here we have some areas that are different. So here there's a subdivision along the top here, there's getting 3 windows here. We're going to start to get a lot more detail in these buildings as we go along. They've got the dumpsters that have lids, lots of more interesting stuff, you know. So we're not going to add everything right now, but we're going to start adding bits and pieces to these. One way I like to add detail is not necessarily just look at the picture here and copy to there. That is a good way, but a better way is actually bring your reference onto the object. There's a couple ways of doing this. One is using what's called rotoscope. So you'll take an object like this building here, this would be this building right there, and we'd frame it, and then we'd go to a rotoscope window and we'd load in the picture, and this was, I believe, building 2, and we have a picture here. You can see that we went in and we split it and moved all the background, and you see there's a picture that could be loaded into the background, and there's our picture right now in the background. And then what you could actually do is move the picture or move the object to get things positioned correctly. Go to rotoscope options, and we can see the width and height. We can also see the position. We can move that using these sliders to get it positioned. Again, if you hold down shift, it'll make the slider more sensitive. We can also scale it using the height scale. At the moment it's scaled uniformly, so actually what we have here is actually the right details for this. I'll just move this down a bit so it's roughly on the ground. There we go. And then you have this in your background, and then you can use that to adjust your object. So we got the object here, we can pick that, we can scale it down. We're just going to move the pivot back, again Alt, temporary pivot, move the pivot to scale that down to the height of that building. And you can see we've got the proportions right now, and then we'll start adding the detail and breaking this up and adding the walls and sections as we go along. And this is, you know, a good way of doing things when you're working in wireframe. Trouble is, as you get to more detail and you start looking at the different views, it starts to get a little bit harder. We can see here in, let's go wireframe there, we could display this in all windows. So we could, there is an option in the rotoscope options to display in all windows. So right now it's fixed, it says fixed, showing all views. Turn it on and it will be displayed in all your views, and then you can of course move it back in the x-axis until it's roughly where you want it. On the object. This is a fairly large image, so just move it back a bit more. I mean, this is great when you're working with things, but the trouble is if you go into shaded mode, and this is actually inside the object, you won't see it. If it's outside the object, you won't see what you're doing on the object. So it's a little bit of a problem. You could make your object semi-transparent, but it's definitely a problem if you're in hidden line. Same thing. The picture is not visible if it's inside the object. So a workaround for that, instead of using a picture when you're modeling, is actually apply the picture as a texture map to the object, and then you can actually see exactly what's happening as you model on the object. And that's what we're actually going to do. So I may use a rotoscope to get the initial proportions down, but then I may switch it later on to an alternate system. So let's just go ahead and do that. So we can go in here, and we don't need this image, so we can remove it if we want. We can just hit clear, that will get rid of it, and now we're no longer in rotoscope view, and we're just going to apply it to the object. So all we do here is take this object and we go in here and we'll do a material, let's do a Lambert, let's just a matte material. Click on the diffuse tab here and just do image. The image still should be here as an image, and we can see here's a building 2 facade clean. We need to put it onto a map in coordinates, so we need to give it new, and this would be the YZ projection. We can go to texture mode or texture decal mode to see that on the object. Again here, texture decal mode, we can see that on the actual object. There's an interesting kind of overlap between these two buildings, so I just need to move this one here just back so it lines up. Again, if I want to move this correctly, again I would hold down Alt, turn the snap on, then hold down Control and just snap it back to that point, so now it's snapped in correctly. And then we can start working with this object. Now we only want to work with this one initially, so we need to add some subdivisions throughout the object. There's a whole bunch of tools. You can actually just right mouse button in component mode or alt right mouse button to see all the different tools you can do. So there's an add vertex edge tool, add polygon tool, split edge tool, a lot of these tools, and they have hotkeys assigned to them. These tools are also located under polygon mesh. We're going to start with a split edge tool, where you can just use a middle mouse and split all the way across, or left mouse just split once. The left mouse will just add a vertex on the edge. Middle mouse will actually add an entire edge loop, and you can see how you can split all the way across to create an edge loop. So it's very quick and easy way to split your object up. So I just added a few edges across to create some of the detail we need for a scene. There's a pipe that goes up here, and then there's also this kind of fence piece here we want to create, and we want to make this a little bit separate to the rest of the object, because there's so much detail here. There's no reason for this to be all one piece. So I'm actually going to break this up by adding a couple of subdivisions where the fence is, and then what we'll do is extract this face out and then work on it separately. So we can do that right now before we start adding more detail throughout the object. So we're just going to go ahead there. Do that, we'll just pick this face, and you can also right mouse button, and you can see that all the commands here, instead of going to the menus, it's much easier to find stuff, but in this case did select polygon by raycasting. There's lots of different ways to select faces, but this is one of the tools. If you want to see the different selection tools, you've got them here under select tools, all the different selection tools. And we're going to go in here and just do a polygon mesh extract, and then we do extract, delete, or we can go in here, right mouse button, and you can actually see that there's actually also disconnect. Disconnect would keep the object connected as one object, instead of actually deleting them. It just breaks the edges, and that may be a better solution at this time. So in this case we'll just do a disconnect components. That just makes border edges around here. We're going to delete some of the extra edges we don't need to work with at this time. So we're getting rid of this top one here, just delete that, and we're just going to get rid of a few of the extra faces that we didn't actually need. We are going to rebuild and stuff later on, so I just deleted this top one, but we are going to rebuild some stuff later on to recreate, and keeping this connected will actually help us a bit earlier on. So we're just going to spin around a bit, and we'll just get rid of any face at this time we probably don't need. We'll just get rid of that one, just get a bit closer in. It's good. Let's just see what else there is here. It looks like we didn't get rid of that one yet, so we'll delete that one. Again, we're going to try to reuse this a bit to add some detail where we need to lower down and then reconnect stuff back together. So I'm not too worried about removing everything at this time. I'm actually going to remove this right now anyway, just so it's out of the way, and we can rebuild any face and area we need to rebuild as we get to that point. So in this case I did actually remove stuff here, and by disconnected, when disconnected this component, you can see this face. If I was to move it, oops, didn't quite disconnect, so I'll do it again. So we'll just get out any tool right now, and we'll just go here, back down, just try to disconnect components again, disconnect, and you can see if I try to move this, it's disconnected, it's free from the other objects. Okay, so that's ready to go, and now we can start adding more detail as we need to, and having that disconnected means we can add detail to areas separately. the area blocked out, as you can see, you have all our objects here. Let me go into the Window Explorer, so View, General, Explorer, and you can see the hotkey there is 8. You can also access the Explorer from several places. You can access it from hitting 8, of course. You can also do a mini Explorer by hitting F3 in any window. You can get what's called a Transient Explorer from here. You can go in and just find and explore on certain items you want to get. You've got scene, passes, groups, operators, lots of, and then of course you can explore a scene, explore a selection, and also explore clusters. So lots of ways to get to the Explorer if you need to. Our scene right now, we've named our objects, mostly. We've got we probably need to name this. So you can either double click on it, or you can just click on the item and hit F2 and just name it. So this is, the pillar, or it's a wooden pole. Let's go a pole for a moment. We've got the grid, we'll name this one ground, F2, ground. So now we have all the objects in our scene named. Now I'd like to organize the scene a little bit more, just for make our life a little bit easier. Some of these objects we're actually going to reference out and then bring them back in again when we go to add detail, and then we'll use them as level of detail. And all the objects, if we want to, we can do that too. So each building we can build separately outside the scene and reference it out. So one thing I'd like to do is name the main objects and then the smaller objects secondly. So let's just go in. We've got our main building here and the poles. They're pretty much attached. If we want to, we can group those together by just dragging and dropping to make a parent-child hierarchy. At the moment we're seeing all parameters. We're seeing all except parameters. Just going to go objects only, and just want to see all the attributes and other nodes. So we just see those two together, and that's one way to quickly group things together. We have a couple of dumpsters here, and we have the ground. We could take all our buildings and make it into a building group, and there's several ways we can make groups. We can pick all the objects here, and we can make a group. I didn't pick the pole because I don't want that in the group at this time. We can make here a group just clicking on the group button. That'll make a new group, and I'll call that building. Let's do GRP for group. And then we can have some of the objects, the pole and maybe the dumpsters, as a new group. Control G is also the hotkey for group, and we'll call that group object GRP. So now we have these two groups, and then the ground as well. The reason I made these groups so I can easily go in and pick those. If I want to say turn all the buildings off, I could hide that group, and that would hide all the buildings. What's nice about groups is it hides not based on the hierarchy. If I pick this building here and hit it, sometimes you hide the entire hierarchy. The groups are not tied to hierarchy, so I can hide this group without hiding all the things in that group as well. You can also use the select stuff. You can do a right mouse button and go select members, and that will select all the members in that group. And you can also use the materials, and it can be used for render settings. I can go here and click on the little group icon, and we can change whether it can be renderable, selectable, animation ghosting, visible. So lots of items inside the groups. So groups are a great way of organizing your scene a bit, but they aren't tied to a hierarchy. The next thing you can do is layers. So sometimes I like to use layers. It's an easy way to turn things on and off instead of hiding. The trouble when you hide an item, you have to go inside your Explorer to find it, to display it. There's two ways to get to your layer menu. One way is you can use the hotkey to go to layers, or you can go from view, general, I think it's in here, scene layer manager, and the hotkey is 6, or you can hit 6 And again, if you go here, CPL tab, you'll see down here you've got animation layers or scene layers. And actually I prefer using this tab, but we can use whatever we want. I just use the layer tab here, and we can make a couple of new layers. Layer, new layer. You can either create a new layer straight off and just cancel that, or you can select the items, like my building group, and go layer, new from selection. I'm just going to actually make sure the items are selected, not just group. Just go select members, and then layer, new from selection, and then make a new group based on that, and we'll do that. Building LYR for layer. And then we'll take our objects, again object, select members, layer, new from selection, object layer. And they've got the ground as well. We'll make a layer for that, layer, new from selection, ground, layer. Okay, so what we can do in here, we can turn different things off. We can turn the object layer, the ground layer, or the building layer. Now, right now, the trouble is when they move the camera around, we'll notice this building gets obscure the other buildings. It'd be nice to split those left and right. So I'm actually going to make it a new layer, and I'm going to call it I just rename R, I'll do a capital R here, for right building, and then the other one will be where we can rename these. Just click inside here, or you can click the find, you can go in here and name those. Okay, so I just did it. And you can also of course click and go right mouse button, properties, and name it in there as well. So we've got right building, left building. I'm going to use camera right and camera left, so I'm just going to pick would it actually been easier to do this the other way, so I'm just going to make that R, and we'll have to get rid of that 1 in a second. I'm just going to get rid of that 1. Come on. Sometimes it's okay. So we got left and right, and we're just going to just take this one here. We'll just go on, pick this layer by clicking on before the layer, and then you got either right mouse button, move selected object to layer, and then what you should have here is that's on the left layer, and then the right one is being moved. So if the layer is exclusive, that means an object can only exist on one layer. You may be able to change that, but as far as I know, most layers are exclusive, and objects can only be on one layer at a time. So moving an object from one onto a new layer, remove it from its previous layer. So there we are. As you can see, default layer right now has nothing on. So we've got our layer set up. Nice about having left and right. If we turn off the left building, we can now move the camera around and things aren't obscured. I can actually see this building here needs to be moved a bit. So I'll just move that. I'm just going to use the temporary pivot and then snap it. Just go back here, make sure point snapping is on. Yes, it is. And just snap it there. Okay. So our blocking's done, and we've done some scene management here to kind of set things up using layers, groups. And the last item I want to talk about is models. So say we wanted to export one of these buildings to work outside the main scene to make our next level of detail. Well, we can do that by picking an object and making a new model. You can either get model here, model, new model, or under edit, there's also model, new model. So if I just do this with this building here, we can go here, model, new model. Now that's going to pull it out from the hierarchy and make a new object called model, and we can call that building model, and inside that will be the building 2. A model can be inside the hierarchy if you want. This is again building 2, and if we look in the building group, it is still in the group, so it hasn't been removed from the group. It's just kind of made a new item for that. And you can actually have models inside the hierarchy, just to show you they can be in there. Just take it out there. So each building could be a model. Once it's created a model, that model can be exported and used outside and then brought back in as a reference if you wanted it to. So just show that, we go File, Export Model. We've got the building model, and it saves as an EMDL file. That's a encapsulated model file. Hit OK, and there we are. We've now removed that and brought it out from the scene. So we can actually go here, we'll save this scene out, so blocking 2, and we'll go new scene, and then what we can do is load in that model. Just go File, Import Model, and here's our model, and it comes into the same position. And this is quite nice because I'm getting it in the same position. When I modify this, I can go ahead and use this to create my different level of details. This would be my low, so I'm just going to, when I make my next one, we're going to do medium and high. Just move the camera around a bit here. See that from the right view. And then we can start adding the detail. We can use the rotoscoping for this technique, or we can use an image. Let's start with the rotoscoping. So you can take a view, and we can go to rotoscope, and the first time you go to rotoscope, it's going to ask you to bring you to rotoscope properties, or if you want to change it, you can go rotoscope options to change it. We're bringing a new image from file. You can see right now there's no source images apart from no icon, and we'll locate the image. I have it located on my desktop, my Vancouver Alley reference, and I think this is building 2. Just go to thumbnails and we should find one of the pictures that's been cleaned up, and I should have one called Clean Up JPEG. This is our Clean Up JPEG, there we are. And this is being shrunk down so it's not an enormously big one. And it comes in here, then we can shift this around by scaling the sizes and adjusting the XYZ position. So just, if you want to go slower, shift, always make these sliders more sensitive. Bring the X across a bit. XD. Just going to move this window down more to the middle so I can kind of see how things are positioned. And we'll just scale that until it fits with the current model. And then move that down to the bottom. Great. So there we are. You can decide if you use camera or pixel aspect ratio. In this case they should be the same because you're using 1:1. Okay, so there we have our image in the background. Now we can start working with our wireframe to do some basic modeling here to make our medium res. So we're just going to go here and we're going to tag and move points. So you can tag points with T, select the points and move them down, and then we want to start adding more subdivisions to give us a detail for the doors and windows and those areas here. So we can do that as well, and the wooden section here. So we're just going to go and use some of the basic modeling tools. On the poly mesh we're going to be using split edge tool. We're going to use probably some add edge tool as well later on, but mostly split edge, and we're going to use the extrude polygon along axis, but we're actually going to get access a different way. There's two ways to access this tool. You can either duplicate a face that will extrude it, or you can use this tool here. Okay. So let's start by using split edge tool. There's a hotkey here. The other way is of course right mouse button or alt right mouse button. You can access all those tools, and you can here see split edge. But you can see the hotkey for that is the right square bracket, and we're just going to go here, and you can see left mouse will split the edge, but middle mouse will do a parallel edge split. I'm just going to go full screen so you can see that. When I actually split this edge here, if I use middle mouse, it's going to split all the way around. If I just use left mouse, it would only split the edge and just add a vertex in. So I actually want to keep those continuous edges going around to create what's called edge loops. And we're just going to be placing those in for the detail where it needs to go. Especially in these kind of door areas. And then of course there's actually a wall along here. See the wall goes a bit further along. Just going to undo that, Control Z. Start the wall there. And then of course for this fence, we're going to go and add this bit later on. I'll show you how we do that without going too crazy. Here this could be texture, so I'm not going to necessarily split everywhere where it needs to be. This is kind of a double area, so I want to actually split here, and again there's some thickness here. And I actually prefer to split like this. I actually find this gives you better geometry. Quite often, previously I see a lot of people going in and they would go in and duplicate a face and kind of scale it back. It's actually better in many cases to go and actually add splits. Even though you've got this line that goes around, it will create slightly better geometry later on, especially when you get to the lighting. And we'll just do a split along the bottom here as well. Great. So we have all this detail in here. Now we can start extruding things back and forwards to give, we actually need a bit here as well, to give some of this depth. So let's go ahead and do that, and we'll look at some of the tools we can use for that. So one of the techniques I use a lot for extruding is picking a face. You can go polygon, or you can hit U, would be by what's called raycast, when you can just kind of drag over the face and select it. Or you can use Y, just by rectangle, when you can actually go and do a rectangle over a bunch of faces and select them that way. We're going to use the U, the raycast, and you can either click once and that will turn on, or if you want to say in select tool, you can hold U down, press it, and then when you let go of it, it'll go back to, you go select tool, so hold it down, click on items, and when I let go of it, it'll go back to the select tool. It's more common if you're using move tools. Okay, so let's go there, and we'll extrude this one. This one will go fairly far back, and we actually want to make sure we have the front or the back. We can see right now we're looking at the back of the object, and there's these buttons here that can switch. You can actually go in here and click on these buttons to go like left, right, front. So you can do that as well. Notice when I went the other side, it looks like an object disappeared, just because basically the camera moved, so the object appears to have disappeared. So I'm just going to use my I just do them in this window, and we can always rotate things around. If I want to say, oh, I want the other view here, if we zoomed out, we'd see that's the Y view. X view. Let me just quickly zoom out here a little bit and just see where we've got things that we actually want. This face here, we're getting that one, so we will do middle mouse. There we are, that's what I wanted. And let's see if that works now. That got it. So there's middle mouse in there, and that will switch you from, you know, a right view to a left view. There we go. I just want to check I was getting the right item selected, so I pick. Of course, now these don't match up with our rotoscope because the object's been flipped. So if that's a problem for you, you can just rotate the object around, and then we have things matching again. So that was a little, you know, it's not always great to have that rotation on the object. I can go ahead and freeze that rotation later on, so it's not a problem, and that's actually a good thing to do. So you've got transform, freeze rotation, and that will remove that rotation, so everything's now back to default numbers. Okay, we've got this up, this face selected. We'll go in here, Control C, or say Control D, and that will duplicate the face, and then we can move it back just with the move tool to give it the thickness. Just going to go here, frame that, and you can see that gave it some thickness. Do the same for the door, Control D, move it back to give some thickness. Same with this one, Control D. This one just needs to be moved back a touch to give some thickness. This one will probably be the same as the other door, Control D, move it back a touch to give some thickness. Great. These sections along here, hit U, will drag along to get those faces. Control D. Now, instead of using Control D this time, I'm actually going to go back and show you the extrude face tool. So if we go right mouse button, extrude long axis, it will actually come up. Just going to zoom out a bit here, and you can see it extruded those along an axis, predefined axis, and we can adjust this number here. One advantage of using this technique is it does actually have a few more values you can play with, such as you can access your subdivisions here. There's also a transform where you can adjust scaling. Translation and rotation. So you've got rotation and translation. So just a few more things you can play around with there. There's also the options to merge on and off. To show you the merge, if I turn merge off, what it means if you had the scaling, it will scale those independently instead of across each one. Make sure everything's switched on as it should be, and we can talk about some of these details later on, but there's lots of inset. It's another way to kind of scale based on the size of each polygon as well. So we have the lower portion of this done, and we haven't done too much to the top portion yet. I actually want to make this fence piece as well and bring this section down so it looks like there is a fence along there. So what we'll do here is we're going to split along the top and then bring this down. I'll show you how we'll do that. So we're just going to go move the camera around so we can get a good angle for that. Pick the object. We're going to go to a split, let's say, no, right square bracket, and we're just going to split along one of these edges for the thickness of the fence, and using middle mouse to go all the way around. Next one I'm going to do is actually pick these faces going across here. I don't want that last one, so we can just Control select it, deselect it, and then we'll do Control D to duplicate faces, and then we'll just move this down. Now what happens is that back one, of course, was left up there. So what we'd want to do in that case is make sure that, it's going to go a bit closer in here to get this moved where I want it to be. Just tweak that. Okay. Want to make sure that's not left behind there, and actually we can, oops, I just create a new one, wrong hotkey. So if we look at this in shaded, we have an extra face kind of going around here that we don't actually want. And this is sometimes a problem when you're doing duplicating things this way, is you actually create some of these extra faces. Now there is another way of doing this that will be cleaner, instead of going in and trying to clean up these up later, and I'll show you that technique as well. So I'm just going to undo this, extrude, and the extra duplicated it. Okay. So instead of extruding there, what we can do is we can actually go in. We already have everything we need in here, so I can actually get those faces selected, okay, delete them, and that's going to leave a hole. We can also get rid of these faces around here and delete those. In that case, the easiest way to get those is actually go in to a side view and hold Y down and draw a box around those. Make sure you're not encompassing the ones you don't want to keep. So this is only ones that encompass. So those, we actually didn't want to get rid of these ones either. So we're just going to go Control Y and draw a box around those. Oops, actually do Shift and Control to deselect. So we just have these ones here selected. We delete those as well, and now I've left a gap going around. And all we need to do is later on clean this up by adding in the extra faces to create that detail. So now it's just a matter of going in and creating some extra faces to close this up. So we can use several tools to do that. Here we actually want a quad, and here of course. So there's a few ways of doing this. Of course, I haven't got everything we need in here to build all the faces, but we'll show you some techniques that can be used to go ahead and create what we need to do. So I'm going to start by picking this edge along here, and we're going to extrude that edge. Now again, there's some great selection tools in here, and we're just going to go in and use one selection tool to select this edge along here. And we're just going to go to E, the edge tool, or click on the edge, pick one edge, hold down Alt, and then left mouse the other edge, and that will do what's called a range selection. It will select the entire range. Control D, duplicate the edge, and we'll just move it down to create that edge. We'll make sure it's in the right place. We can do that by using some snapping tools if we want to make sure that that edge is moved in the correct place, or I can just eyeball it. If I was to use a snapping tool, Control, I could drag that until it snaps to one of those points, and because I dragged along an axis, that works fine. This one here will need to be welded. We'll do that as we go along. Now we'll start closing the geometry up by using the polygon, add polygon tool. So here, add edge polygon, we just pick one polygon and go to the other face and pick the other polygon, and there you are, the face is correct. You can start new, right mouse button, and do your next polygon from here across to there. Now that will take a long time. Again, I don't believe in spending hours doing stuff like this. So again, we can use just right mouse button, not use that tool, but look at the more effective tool to do this. We got bridge edges. So there's bridge polygons, and there's bridge boundary points and edges. So I'm just going to select the edges on both of these, So we've already got these ones selected, so we just need to select these ones over here. Do Shift, add the edge, hold down Alt, and click on the other edge. Now we've got both those edges selected, and we'll just go here, Polymesh, Bridge, Boundary, Points, Edges. It needs a distance to actually do it, and this is quite a large object, so you may have to go quite a long way before you get the correct distance. And there you are, those are all closed. And I did input edges. The last thing is I've got a couple of borders I need to close down here. That should be fairly straightforward. Mostly, if we look at the point here, just going to go close in on that point. Just tag a few of those points and frame it. So, if we're to move, use the move point. Just make sure nothing's left here. So we can see that's not connected. If I just use a weld, move and weld, should be able to just weld that, and that will close everything down. And now all the blue lines are gone, and we have this as a single piece and component. So now we actually have the shape of an object. Let me just spin that around, and you'll see. Deselect it and just spin around here to show you roughly what we have for our building. See, the lighting is not great on this at this time. We can, if want to, go in here and just go to display options and add a headlight. Just check the lighting is okay. Now you can add specular as well to that, and that's just under the display options per window. And now we can see, as we spin around, how everything looks, especially now with the headlight. This is still a model, and we can save this again. This time we can save it as a medium res. So we can do File, Save As, and if we do Save As, it's going to save as a scene file. So if we don't want to make a scene file, we can actually make this another model file. So we can actually close that, and we can have the model selected, and we can do File, Export Model, and this can be mid. And then we could do another one later on where we add in all the individual beams and cross sections here that would be high. So we just go here, open our master scene again, yeah, I haven't saved that scene, but I have the model saved, so I don't need to save it. It's up to you whether you want to keep this a scene as well. I say save it now, no. Hopefully I won't regret that. We have this object here, and we can just go there, File, we can actually go to this model, and we can make it a reference model if we want to. So we can actually, eventually we're going to remove this one and create a new one here. So I'm just going to delete this in a second, but it's for File, Import, Reference Model, and we'll go with the basic one first of all, and there's our reference model one. We can actually delete this one here, looks like the camera disappeared. Oh, it just turned the layers back on. Okay, so Oh, I see. Building 2 was actually... Okay. So anyway, we'll just hide that one for a second. Okay. So there's our basic one. Within a reference model, we can actually go in here and add a resolution. And then next resolution here, we can go in and browse, and we can go in for the mid one. So we can switch the resolutions by switching it to our basic one, and of course our actual model that's the right size and shape for the scene. Of course the first one is just a basic blocking, and we're starting to bring in the detail bit by bit, and we'll do the same for the dumpsters, and each object we'll build and then start to re-reference back into the scene. So let's go in here and we will apply a material Lambert. We're doing this because we're applying our reference to the object. Why? Well, we'll show you in a second. Go new from file, and I have a favorite of my desktop. Now you can make a favorite just very simply by going to the location you want to go to, and clicking on here, add to favorite. Or if you have favorites, you can just go straight to that favorite. That takes me to where I was. And we'll look at this building 2. I like this picture here. I took the pictures that were these alleys, and they were big and complex and horrible with foreground objects. Actually I took a bunch of pictures, I converted to panorama, I distorted it to flatten it out, and then I took the image and removed all the foreground elements to create a nice flattened picture with lots of bad cloning. Once we have that, we can pick a texture projection, because if we look at this, let's just do Alt 6, in texture mode it's still grey, but if we go new, planar on the XC, we have our projection, or Alt 7, we could have done this by the pull down of course, but you know, we want to be efficient if you're working in production. So we have that, we're good, we're happy, but we're not quite done yet, because I want to show you something. We're using this as a reference. One of the advantages of not putting something on texture, when you move points, your texture deforms, so not great reference. But here's something fun. If the object selected and we go to projection swim, now when we move points, the texture doesn't deform. Why this is good? Well, when we start adding more detail to this object, it's going to maintain that. So let's go ahead and start adding more detail. We're going to go to this window. We're just going to go to our mode here, and we're going to add detail by using the modeling tools. It's a bunch of which simple modeling tools right now. Pretty much going to use one or two tools for the moment. We're going to use our split edge tool, we'll probably use the add edge tool a little bit, we're going to use the extrude face, but we're not even going to use that because we're going to use duplicate face by just duplicating faces with the hotkey to duplicate. That's Control D. So let's go in and do this. So we're going to go in here, hit the hotkey, and we're going to start adding points where we need them. So there's this beam along there, bang, beam along there, and we can just start adding this stuff in to define our shapes. Make sure we get the major detail in first, and we'll add the minor detail in as need be. So, you know, there's a top of that. These are a little bit higher up, and I'm trying to minimize some of the usage, and we'll show you why. We're going to add across there. Again, this door has been fairly concreted in, but we can take care of that later in. I'm just going to move some points around. This is the advantage. Now remember before, we'll turn swim on for a moment so you can see the difference stick and swim. You've got to pick some edges. You can go edge mode or E for edge. Pick a couple of edges, and we will pick a bunch of these edges that need to be moved up. Actually, we probably could move the whole all of these edges up, just looking at this object, but I think these are a little bit lower, so I'm just going to move those edges up. We move them up, doesn't have a problem. Now the only problem I see right now is there's not an edge here to hold this piece in, so we're just going to add another edge. Notice when I add another edge, it didn't actually deselect the other edges I had, so we're just going to deselect those. We do Control Shift, let's go E, Control Shift, just deselect those two edges, and now we can move edge mode, Control Shift, and we get rid of that edge. Now we can hit V. V is the hotkey to move, or you can just click on T if you can't remember the hotkey. Hold your mouse over it, it tells you the hotkey is V. Good, so we've moved those up, and we're now going to get some detail in here. We're going to add another edge in there, and we'll start adding these detail in as we need be. Middle mouse is adding an edge loop. That's edge that loops all the way around. Very simple, very quick, very easy to add these edge loops in where you need them to go. There's other tools you can use, but these are some simple tools to get us going, to get us moving fast and quickly and easily. I'm trying to maintain everything as edge loops. So the way I'm building stuff, if I add detail in, I'm trying to not build things inefficiently whenever possible. It will look like there's a lot of edges going all the way around. I can just pick these two objects. We'll start to pick this one. It's really got a big indent in there. So we'll just go there and pick that, and we'll hit Control D. That will duplicate the face. We'll go to the Move tool and just move it back. And you can see now we have some depth there. So is there some stretching of textures? That's going to happen. That's fine. That's expected. Again, we're going to do these doors that aren't quite as extruded in. These two. Control D. And we'll move those back just a smidgen. And then these ones that are hardly in at all, pick those two here. We're in the U hotkey, you're holding Shift down. Shift adds to selection. Again, we can see that. And again, we just duplicate those, and those are going to be back even less, just a tiny bit. If you want to move, okay, so there we are. So we have the initial detail put in. Now we can see there's some more detail I want to work. We can see here. Undo that for a second. I just duplicated the face because I hit the wrong key then, so I just get rid of that. Okay, so we can see we've got the first detail. If we turn to shaded mode, or 5, we can see, but it's actually not very interesting. There, so we orbit around a bit, and you can see. Now I've changed my orbiting keys, so it's now slightly less different keys. I'm using right for orbit. That's set under the File, Preferences, under Tools, Camera, and it's on Alternate. That I find is because my finger's on the left mouse button. Most time I want to spin things around. The other option, and then the other time I want to zoom things, so I'm actually using the big keys for two main things. Panning I do not quite as much as that. So we have this done. We can orbit around. We can see that we've got some detail there. I want to add in all the wooden slats. Now this is a whole bunch of detail, so instead of going in and adding all this detail across the entire object and making a big mess, and I'm adding a lot of detail to this because I'm eventually going to bake all this into maps. So it's okay to add too much detail initially because we're going to bake it down. So we can see we've got this detail here. I'm going to actually cut this section off the geo, especially because it is kind of, so we're just going to pick those faces, grab that one as well, and we're just going to go right mouse button will open up a window. The window will be common use tools on the currently selected object. One of these ones is to disconnect components. Yep, disconnect, and now it's a separate polygon shell. We can see that if I actually move those, you can see they're no longer attached. And then we can go in here and start adding more detail. So we're just going to use the edge tool here, and we're going to start adding in. Now we want to make sure we add it to the right area, so we've got these ones at the top, so I'm just going to get rid of those ones. I want to pick a bunch of faces at once, so I'm just going to have Y and just drag over those, delete them, and just get the last one's Y. Right now it's only taking contained polygons, so we can see it's much easier. We'll start adding in the detail to add. It doesn't matter if they're quite exactly the right place, because we can go in later and tweak them. I'm also trying to use the existing ones whenever I can, because there's no point adding extra detail if you don't need to add extra detail. And we're just going, and another thing I could have done is made one section and then reuse it, but I'm going to have some fun here, might as well make the whole lot. Okay, so let me just go in here and just start tweaking those edges around a bit. Just go to edge mode, and we'll just pick edges and move them if they need to be shifted a bit here and there. I'm holding E down each time, so there's an edge that needs to be out of there. There you go. And we're just going to move these as need to be into position. That one there. Now it's kind of I have to pick each one and move each one, really inefficient. You know, holding E down, pain. Don't like it, don't want to do it. So there's an option here. We'll just go under the transform options, transform preferences, and right now when you're outside manipulator, it does what's called simple transform. That means left will go wherever, middle will go back and forwards, right will go menu, I guess. Okay. So I don't like that, so I'm just going to go here from simple transform to select all. What's that mean? It means I can now click on something, select, move, kind of a la Maya style. So we can quickly see we can move these things, adjust them, work on them, manipulate them as need be. And we forget we're actually using swim mode that gives us live reference. We need to add another edge in there. Remember, this is a kind of pain to do in some packages. So we can just go in and start tweaking stuff as we need to. And don't move it there. I'm only moving actually in the x-axis, so we can actually lock these as well. So we can just click on X only, and now whenever we pick on things, I don't have to worry about going in and picking the wrong axis. It's just again is a little thing to make my life a little bit easier and a little bit faster. Same with points. We're just going to T tag point mode, and we're going to same thing with points. There's also a move tool, but you know, this tag point tool is pretty easy to use. I just want to get some of these shifted where they need to be. And just shifting a few of these around to give that little variation. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect because it can always be tweaked later on. No, I couldn't pick that one, so I had to go back, and I could have just gone to a tool. Again, some of these are not quite lined up and the Y, so what I'm just going to do is pick a bunch of these points. I'm going to hold Alt down. I'm going to click over here to snap it. I'm going to go to Rotate tool. I'm going to rotate the points down a little bit, maybe move them down a bit. Come on down. Oh, it's locked. Move them down a bit, and that's pretty good. We're going to add again. There's a section here that kind of goes across this beam. So again, we're just going to add our tool here. We're just going to split along the middle there. We're going to split down the bottom here because they don't extrude all the way out. It looks like there's a beam through the middle, but we're not going to worry about that. And then what we'll just do is, some areas there's a little less detail in there. It's like a double beam. Again, I'm not going to worry about that at this time. I'm going to assume that as a top, and I'll move things around if need to be. So we can actually go in here, and we're just going to select zoom in. If we hold down Z, you can do it. We can left mouse button, but you can also do Control. Shift Z, and we can do a rectangle zoom and get in there, and then we can just pan a little bit and just kind of go through, and anything we need to tweak we can. I'll just go here, click on all three. I need to do M, the move tool this time, and just move these to align. If you want to keep them going up and down, you can click on them once and then you get the tool. It's right now in local mode. You can change at any time. You can right mouse button, change the mode to global. You can change over here to the mode as well. We'd leave it as global just to make, again, things as simple as possible. The other option, of course, is lock in a manipulator, in this case the Y only, and then it'd be a little bit easier to move things around. Probably would need another. You can also move edges as well. Okay, so that's good. We're just going to zoom in a bit. We can, in the new version, you can use a wheel, but so let me just move that point there a bit. If I double click, it will switch over to another manipulator. So that's another little trick you can do to adjust things. Okay, so we're going to extrude those faces. So we'll go, U is select by ray casting. It's kind of a pain here to select them all, but we'll do it anyway. Just hold, and we'll just go in and start picking these. If you pick something wrong, just Control, we'll toggle it. I can't control my mouse. If you find that too much pain, you can just hit Y once. It will do a sticky key, keep it on. You're going to hold Shift and just draw boxes around them, and because the Y is only encompassed, it will only get stuff, and Shift adds, so you can actually see it's only getting what I need here. So we can quickly go in. Again, I wish there was a quicker, easier way to select this. There probably is. There are many tools, selection tools, but when you got like fine detail like this, and when I'm using a mini mouse, you can see it's not too bad. Anyway, so we'll just go ahead and select all of these. If I pick the wrong thing, I can quickly deselect it with Control Shift. A few more. And again, in the class I'd only do a few of these so people don't get bored stupid. And we just got 3 more. 1, 2, 4 more. Okay, so we've got all those, and we know, very simple, we're just going here, Control D, duplicate it, move it, just going to frame in a bit here, and you move those. In this case we're going to move them forward a bit. And then with all those selected, we're going to do a little bit more detail. We're going to move the in-between ones back a bit, the middle in-between ones. So we're just going to go in here and control a toggle. So that's what we're going to do, control, and we're just going to drag over everything for the moment, and then we will unselect the top and the bottom. So we'll just do that. So go to control, and we'll just select over the whole lot there, and then we'll do control shift, get rid of the end one we want to ignore, and then also the top, and control shift on the bottom. We're in the Y mode, polygon selection by rectangle. We'll hit control D again, and we'll move those back a bit. So now we have the fence. We could have deleted the faces if we want to, that may be something we do, but it's actually quite nice to have a detail. If we look at this with texture, we're starting to get more of the depth. You can't really see it with the lighting turned on because I'm in constant mode, but if you just go textured, and we're to stick a light in the scene, primitive light, just going to stick a infinite light. There's already one in there in the scene, it's kind of dark, so we'll just get to that one. 8 will turn on your Explorer, if it's like a little list view, and you can see the light there. We can just hit R to reset the camera here. And we can move this out. Oops, that's all good as well. We can just put the light. Just pick the light. Moving the light does nothing because it's a directional light, but when you rotate it, you can see how it rotates, and now we can actually see some of the detail in the shading of the object. Of course, if I did this correctly, I would have removed all the light from the scene first of all. You can really see how we got some depth now on this. If we were to move the light from side to side, you can see that go areas that go into shade. And so I'm pretty happy with that so far. There's more work we can do to it. Of course, there's this thing here, so let's go ahead and add detail to that. So we'll just go in here, and we'll use our tool to add some extra subdivisions in. You can see how the subdivisions do run across the surface. This needs to be extruded out, so in this case we'll just pick the face here, Control D, move it out so it's about right, and then what we want to do in this case is move the top corners, bring them back in. So we go to Move Tool, we'll turn on to what's called Snap, and this is Target Weld, and then we'll just weld those back in, and then we have our extra little vent. And this is really what we're doing here. We're just going to build in the detail as we need it. eventually what we'll do is replace the textures to textures that actually will have no lighting information. And what I'd actually do is make a wood texture and a brick texture and a paint texture and a door texture, and then we'll use those later on. This door has a lot of detail in it. If we look at the door, we can see it has a it's actually what it was is a kind of guardrail on the door and mesh on the door, but we can go and add some detail to the door as well if we want to. We can see right now the door is actually a little bit smaller than the frame we have here, so we can go in and create a little frame for it, bring it back a bit. So again, what I tend to do here is try to use some of the existing geometry. So we're just going to edge tool and just move, or we can use the M tool to move. Just bring that down a bit to leave that there, because I've just noticed it actually needs another. There was an edge there, so we'll just go in here. We'll split an edge here, and what we're going to do is do a bunch of splits to really give this the detail it needs. Now we'll notice here that it didn't quite match the map. I didn't actually 100% distort the map correctly. These maps were photographic reference, and I had to go in and adjust them to make them right, but that's okay. We'll just go in here, bring that, Control D, move it back a tiny bit, and happy with that. And that's really what we're doing, just going in and adding detail, creating detail, making the detail we need. If there's a door handle, there's a block here, again we can do that. And I'm trying to again add detail going right through, not because I'm lazy, but just because it makes usually slightly better geometry. We can cut the geometry up later on and have these doors separate if we wanted to. So to zoom down a little bit there, this whole portion we can go in quickly, and we're just going to make this square section here for the door handle. This is another, probably I'd make this a separate piece to really make this correct, but just take that, move it out a little bit to give it that volume here. There's this portion here, this little kind of square, and then it has a door handle coming across there, so we'll just go in here and do a couple more splits to get that detailed in. In this case I probably will break it apart, just because you're adding so much detail just to get this in. We can see it's not really worth it. So what I would do in this case is take this portion, extract it, and then make it a separate piece, or add the extra piece on top is another way of doing that. So we can go in here and say, okay, this door handle section really is a separate piece and needs a lot more detail work on it. So we could do that by just going in, maybe creating a new primitive polygon mesh cube. I want to keep everything with the same geometry just because of texturing. So probably being good to save at some point. Oh, there, that's good, it came back. Yeah, saving scenes, very important, especially when you spent a good 20 minutes of work. So file, save as. We will put this into my training project. Okay, so we've gone in, we've added some detail, we've just started to add the door detail in here. I want to make this a slightly separate object, so I'm just going to go in and frame that. And what I'm going to do is actually take this portion here and make an extra piece from that. So what it's going to do is, same idea, we're just going to duplicate it, Control T. We're going to scale that down a bit. And then what we're going to do is extract it. Just going to go to text decal so I can see clearer. So we're just going to move this and get it all positioned correctly. Just going to get edge mode so I can actually see the edges lined up. Yep. So take this and we're just going to extract it. Let's see if we can do it without extracting it. Let's go Control T again. Get it in there. Control T again. Bring that back a bit. Control T again. Scale that in. Do it again. Move that out. Again. Scale it in. Again. Move it out. Move it out again. We're just doing a bunch of extrudes here just to make that handle block just tumble around a bit here. That's more that needs to come out. Control D again, and we'll just move it across there. And then what we'll do is just go in and start moving some of these around to make them so we're just going to go here. Let's go to a side view. You can quickly switch to a side view if we want to, just with these buttons. So we'll just go here and move all this back there for a moment. Then we'll just turn it back off and we can jump back to that view. We're going to take these ones here. Okay. Okay, so what we just created is this little block here. It's not quite in the right position yet, but it's very easy for us to go in and start moving these around. So we're just going to have these points already tagged earlier, just going to re-tag them, and we're just going to move those up to there, and then we'll just tag these points. Move that up till we get everything roughly in the right position, and we can see here as we move this back and forwards until it gets about right. It looks like there's slightly slightly not straight, but that may just be the view here. So anyway, we can see where we are. Just tumble around that slightly and you can see what we got there as for the door block. I think that needs to go a bit further in, so we'll just pick up all the front here. Again, we can just go to one of our views. So we're just going to go in here and move all that back a bit. So there we go. So anyway, and we'll say that's a shadow there. And that's pretty much done. I mean, this is pretty much modeled now with most of the detail we need. There's of course bits more detail here and there. There's wires and cables. This portion here we probably need. Should we brought that out yet? No, that portion needs to come out. So we'll just quickly do that. If I want to pick all these all the way across, we can hold Alt down and then leave it left or middle, and we can pick a whole strip. Again, very quick, very easy to use some of these selection tools and some of these are really intuitive and really help you build things fast. There's a pipe that goes down the back here, same idea. Probably should have put it in before. You can see that's actually not there right now. We can fix that very easily if we need to, without like deleting this extrude we just did, because we say, well, you know, I want that piece there and I need to add that pipe in. So we're actually going to go in and just do it, pick all those again. So we'll just go to U, pick a face here, just go down the bottom. We can also do middle mouse and then pick the whole strip, and just again hitting Control D and move the whole thing out. But now we get that extra bit there. We don't have to worry about that because we can just go in and snap that back in. So we can just find that face here. Just going to hit F and just hit the move tool. Again, use the target weld and just weld those back in. And what's going to happen is when we weld all this back in, it's just going to get rid of that bit we just did. And if we want to, we can just quickly Alt middle mouse, just pick the loop again, move it out a bit more again. There's a couple of points there that we may not like. If we look at that, you can see there's some points there that aren't really attached. Best thing to do there is just go in again and weld points down, and that should get rid of any of the double faces. If we pick this face again and move it, it's now all attached. Probably wouldn't be best to do it the right way first of all, but if you make a mistake, it's very easy to adjust and fix. Now, we've noticed some of the texturing is not beautiful. So how do we make all that work? Well, there's several ways of doing it. Using this technique is a great advantage as you build things. It keeps everything kind of attached, but then you get some ugly texturing on the corners. The correct way, of course, would be to re-texture all the edges with the right texture, and that's really how I should do it. If you want this texture to fit slightly better, you can go in and kind of cheat. Let's have a look where the texture is really sliding badly. Well, here we actually can see some of the textures already there, and you can see over here it's sliding really badly. So if I pick this edge, I just want to show you a little fun process here. We just pick this edge here. I'm going to hold Alt and left mouse to get to the bottom of that edge. Come on. Sometimes it doesn't always get it. Okay, but that's most of the edge we got. Just going to frame it and just add in that last edge there, and then we'll just move the edge. As you move it, the texture will start to line up. Of course, it line up because that's changed. Now, if we wanted to, we could have frozen that and then gone back. If we change here the mode from projection to stick, now it's stuck again. Now the thing is, Swim will reproject all the time, so if we again move these edges back, that is now, as you can see, fixed. So that's one way of fixing some of the texture problem. Now, of course, the minute I went back to Swim, it stretches again because it's how it's been projected. It's been projecting this reprojecting all the time, so of course it's not actually, if I go back to stick, it's there as it was. So that's just one thing to be aware of. You could use that later on to pull things around and then get your texture to fit, and it's kind of like doing your UV in 3D. Of course, what I would do is go in and create new textures and put them all in later on anyway. But that kind of adjusting the geometry slightly is actually a good little trick I will do sometimes to get rid of some of the stretching also, so I'd actually have UVs lined up on top of each other. So just to save this, okay, and if we go here to the rendering, text editor, you can see, I don't know why it's all set up, but you can see there, if I go in again and pick these edges and move them, you can see how that texture changes in the UV window as long as I'm in stick. Again, again when it goes back, you can see. Anyway, lots of fun stuff you can do there in XSI.